Okay. So welcome everyone to the Connecticut Career Pathways Commission working group for the Career Connected Education Student Access Group. Um, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 2:04 p.m. So quick agenda for today. We'll do roll call, new introductions, approval of minutes. We're going to get a stakeholder engagement update from Jesse Bucolo. He's been doing work across the state, and it's just a really good way to set the stage for today. We're going to do an overview of what's coming down the pike this August. We have a full Pathways Commission meeting on August 13th that we're preparing for. And then the bulk of this meeting is an open discussion on how we can better embed dual enrollment and credentials of value in the statewide pathway system. Let's get the screens in order. So let's do a roll call. I just want to make sure, can folks still see the slides?
Now we're getting your Zoom get started
Okay.
screen.
Sorry, I'm all out of sorts. Give me a second.
Right. Now we have a lovely background. We're
I
actually
got you guys. Hang on. Where'd they go? Hey, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Sorry about that.
Christina is there too, Ben,
Yes.
so you
Yeah,
know.
we are all set.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, here we are. Okay. So let's quickly do a roll call for working group members to start. So Paul Costello,
Present.
thank you. Gabrielle Hendricks, I know couldn't make today. Radenka Marich, I don't see her. Okay. Henry Martin, I'm not seeing him. Okay. Jeff Newton,
Here.
thanks, Jeff. Alice Pritchard,
Here.
Christina Royal,
Present.
and Charlene Russell Tucker.
Present.
Thank you. And just a heads up for everyone, Ari Santiago has officially been added to the commission. He's going to be in this working group. He couldn't make today. So we have one, two, three, four, five, right? One, two, three, four. Yep, five of the nine. So we have a quorum. Does anyone have changes for the meeting minutes from July 14th, 2026? They were attached in the invitation of this meeting.
Move to accept.
Thank you, Alice. Can there be a second motion?
Second.
Thank you. So the minutes were approved at 2:07 p.m. Okay.
Wait, you have to do the vote. Sorry.
Oh, do all vote in favor?
Aye.
Does
Yes.
anyone
Aye.
abstain?
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Meeting minutes were approved still at 2:07 p.m. Okay. So we have some new faces here. So we are in the recommendations phase leading up to the August 13th meeting that we'll be leading. The recommendations are in dual enrollment and credentials of value. So to prepare for that and to make sure that we are developing recommendations that make sense and also recognizing that there are people who are deeply involved in this work every day. We've invited some folks outside of our working group. So what I'm going to do is just ask people, I'll go in order to introduce themselves and then rather than just generally talking about what you do, if maybe you could just say, one thing that you're really excited about that you're working on in regards to career pathways. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so if you don't have anything, that is okay. Madeline DeGrone, she might not be here. I know Emily Palin's not here. Jan?
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. I was having problems this morning. If I do again, I would probably take my video off. But good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jan Hockadell. For about 7 more months, I'm a state senator, but also a teacher and the president of the American Federation of Teachers here in Connecticut. And I'm really excited about a program that every student can be a part of that helps them pick out career pathways during their educative years, but also beyond.
Thanks, Jan. Chris Todd.
Hi, everyone. Chris Dodd, Executive Director of Office of Early College Programs at UConn, longtime concurrent enrollment dual credit instructor, and then I've been with the program for 4 years. We're excited. We have 21,000 students in Connecticut taking 37,000 UConn courses this past year, and so we're excited to continue to partner with our nearly 200 high schools to sort of allow them to customize the UConn courses they need to best meet student pathways. So I know Jeff's like a great example of district partners that have done this work with us. So excited to be here.
Thank you, Chris. And real quick, I just to make sure everyone can see the slide now, correct? Okay, cool. To Daryl Stark.
You're on
Daryl, we
mute.
can't hear you.
I clicked to unmute and it gave me access to control your slides. So I had to
Oh,
undo that.
okay.
Good afternoon to Daryl Stark, Vice Provost for Student Success here at UConn. In addition to working with Chris in early college, we also, my portfolio consists of engaging students in high school outside of the classroom to promote access, post-secondary preparation, and success at the post-secondary level.
Thank you. Karen Hynek.
Hi, everyone. Karen Hynek, Acting Provost for Connecticut State Community College. We're very excited to serve over 7,000 Connecticut students in dual and concurrent enrollment. We're very happy to see that our policy has been approved to open access beginning in the ninth grade with a 2.0, which we think will really help build additional pathways. And one of the partnerships that we're most excited about over the next year is our work with the CTEC system, piloting first with culinary arts.
Thank you, Karen. Tamika Davis.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tamika Davis, Associate Vice President of Recruitment Admissions and Community Outreach for CT State. I think the work that I'm most excited about is that we're collaborating with Provost Hynek's academic and student affairs team to bring on new platforms to really streamline our enrollment processes for onboarding students and developing strengthened orientation and onboarding programs for them as well.
Thank you, Tamika. Kimberly Costellis.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Costellis. I'm the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at Central Connecticut State University, and excited to be able to join the conversation as we have, like others, we have been expanding out our dual and concurrent enrollment, and excited about the growth and the opportunities that it's been providing for the high school students. And one thing that I'll just mention, in talking with some K-12 partners in looking at the courses, concurrent courses, and as well as the dual enrollment, really trying to focus on partnering around the career pathways and combining some of our course offerings in those areas, instead of there's such a buffet of menu options, and really trying to focus around some of the career pathways. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and learning from others.
Kim, you've teed up some of the bulk of our conversation today, so thank you.
Oh, good.
Jen Witness.
Hi, I'm Jen Witness. I'm the president of the Connecticut Conference of Independent Colleges. I'm actually on the full commission, but joining this work group in addition to another working group. Happy to be here. Echo what Kim just said, and just to add that SD has done some really great work seeding growth for dual credit at both the public and the private colleges in Connecticut. So excited for the commission to sort of scale that across the state.
Thanks, Jen. Moving on to state government. I'm not sure if I saw Irene Parisi, but if she's here, she could introduce herself. I don't think so. Karen Amaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Karen Amaker, Director of Workforce Development and Career Readiness for SDE. Really excited to be here and just continue the conversation with some of you that we began some time ago related to career pathways, industry recognized credentials, and other initiatives in support of our school districts and in collaboration with our IHEs. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Tracy, I didn't see her, but if she's here, she could introduce herself. And if not, Ben Hensley.
Hey, good afternoon, y'all. Ben Hensley with the Office of Workforce Strategy. Really excited about the state's implementation of Workforce Pell, which will provide students with new opportunities to access short-term training programs that are credit-bearing. So good to see y'all.
Thanks, Ben. And I'm seeing Keith Norton here. Keith, I don't think you've joined one of our working group meetings, so if you could just introduce yourself also. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, Ben. Keith Norton here. I am the Chief Strategic Planning Officer for the Department of Education, and half of my office oversees the area of workforce development, career readiness, which, of course, includes our dual enrollment programs.
Great. Thanks, Keith. All right, so we are going to start this off with an update on stakeholder engagements. My colleague Jesse Piccolo has really been doing a statewide tour, listening to all sorts of folks, and this will just sort of set us up for really what we're working towards. So, Jesse, just tell me next slide as you go along. And Jesse, promise you will keep this to under 10 minutes.
Yes, I'm going to keep it under 10 minutes, so we're going to go through it pretty quickly. But thanks, Ben, and hi, everybody. I'm Jesse Bucklow. I'm supporting stakeholder engagement for the commission, and it's really great to be with all of you today. So this slide is just a comprehensive overview of our stakeholder engagement. To date, we've reached over kind of 550 stakeholders. There's a ton of different sectors involved with career pathways, but some key highlights are that we've engaged with 81 districts and 27 higher ed institutions. A lot of people on this call have helped facilitate some of that engagement, so thank you for that. And I would add 10 plus employers from a business roundtable we did this morning, but we are continuing to engage with stakeholders over the next few months to make sure that their voices are helping shape the recommendations. And that both includes folks here in the state, but also national and other state partners as well. This is for your record, you can see which K-12 districts we've engaged with, but across multiple regions of the state. You can go next slide. These are all the higher ed institutions that we've heard from so far. And thanks again for the folks on this call that have helped organize this part. And so I'm just going to share some preliminary themes that we've heard so far. There are a bunch of other things we could be talking about this, but just want to highlight some of the key points. One is that dual enrollment and CTE courses are often shaped by which teachers happen to be certified in a school and not necessarily student interest or where the market or labor demand is. And I think that one of the quotes is actually from someone in this call, so thank you for that. Another key theme is that dual enrollment it's not really a cost positive for colleges and universities, whether they're private or public. And so a lot of our partners have reported that current tuition and reimbursement arrangements do not cover the actual cost of what it takes to deliver this dual enrollment. The third theme is that students often discover existing opportunities by accident. So some schools might market dual enrollment opportunities really well versus other schools, students are finding it through a student, through a class. And so there's an inconsistent experience about how students are navigating and finding those opportunities. The other theme that we're hearing from is that a lot of programs are dependent on one person, and there's a lot of fear if that person leaves, then the program falls apart. And so that can be true for kind of dual enrollment as well as career pathway programming. The next theme is that there's a ton of districts that report that a small percentage of students are earning a workforce credential, and they don't know, schools don't know which credentials are valuable to employers. And then there's a ton of credentials that exist in this universe that are just there, but might not be any value to what businesses in the state are looking for. And then the final piece is there's not a lot of incentive for folks at the moment to want to go back and get into the classroom or get a certification. And sometimes it's incentive based, but other times we hear it's just there's a lot of requirements to get credentialed. And so just kind of showing a quote from a public safety focus group we did. So these are just preliminary findings from focus groups that we've done in the past, but just wanted to share kind of like what we're hearing so far in a really short way. This is sharing the upcoming engagement prior to your commission meeting in August. And so the next slide is going to ask a question around this, but we have a meeting with CSEU students, with school principals, with teachers, with parents and families, and then high school students coming up over the next month. And so we're going to ask you a question about that in a moment, but just want you to be clear of what's next in the docket in terms of the immediate calendar. And really the bulk of the time that we have left, would love to engage in a quick conversation about what else do we want to validate and what do we still want to learn. So, do the themes that I just shared around student access add up, or do you want to continue to validate something, or does something not make sense as much? And then the second question is, based on all those future meetings that we have prior to your commission meeting, as you're coming up with some draft recommendations or things you want to test out, like what haven't we asked stakeholders, or what do you want to know from the upcoming stakeholder groups as we head towards fall recommendations?
Jesse, can you put the themes back up again?
Sure.
Thanks.
See a hand from Jen.
I guess, Jesse, I was just thinking about I know that in G and SC may be able to help, but there are some career pathways built with dual credit that I feel like maybe I would be helpful to have some more like positive, like who's doing this right, Jesse, and like to think about some best practices potentially, which I'm sure you've already learned about, but if you need help sort of identifying, so just because I don't think all course offerings are only following credentialed teachers. I think that's the case at many, but it would be helpful, I think, to hear about like who is doing this right, and maybe you already have that.
Yeah, yeah, we can return. I can definitely come back with that. There has been a lot of positives mentioned, so I don't want this to all feel like it's deficit. I will say that every now and then, when there is a positive and then a deficit right next to each other, it just shows the inconsistency of experience, and so that's what we're trying to call out as a key theme across.
Right. It's just whether some of I might sorry to cut off the folks that are waiting to raise their hand, but and the second question is like, is that scalable? Like what's happening right
Yep.
now? Is it
No, it's a
scalable
great
and
point.
applicable? Okay, thanks. Sorry.
I'm going to call on folks in the order that I saw them, and then I'm going to ask after these three questions we don't do anymore. We can take stuff offline. Chris?
Yeah, I think something that I would also add in is I know there's a lot of emphasis on sort of teacher credentialing, but I mean, for instance, we have almost 2,000 credentialed teachers, but we only have 1,200 that are actively teaching. So I think the other piece to keep in mind is enrollment requirements at the district level to maximize FTEs for teachers. So we have a lot of partner schools that have certified teachers that want to run courses, but they don't get enough student enrollment in the course to run it. And so they can't justify the cost of the teacher. So I think that's the other piece to factor in too.
Chris, I'd love to go deeper on that, on maybe not right now, but I think that's a
Right.
point that I haven't really heard yet, and thank you for that perspective. Karen?
Right. Two things. One, I'm looking at the theme students often discovering existing opportunities by accident. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. I'm sorry, I have a dog in the background. Um, can you hear my dog?
It's
Okay,
not an
sorry.
issue.
All right. So students often discovering existing opportunities by accident. I'm wondering what that looks like and what program of studies look like, and the counseling piece behind that as well. And then the other part is, or the other question is really around student participation. And who are we talking to? How are we getting those student groups and making sure that there's broad representation throughout the state? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And Jesse, you can take that offline.
Yep, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jesse. So I'm going to pass it over to Jeff now. He's going to give an overview of what's coming up and just recentering, what we spent the last month or so doing. And then Christina is going to facilitate a discussion and get our recommendations going. So, Jeff.
Yes, you can see kind of our calendar of the next set of dates. We've got three working group meetings left. Looking left to right, July 21st, which is today's. Then next week, the 28th. And then we have our August 11th working group, which is kind of our final review and discussion of some of the recommendations that will be presented. Then on August 13th, when we have our next on-site commission meeting, we'll be presenting the draft recommendations to the commission, and we'll see what we get for. Obviously, we'll engage in discussion. We'll see what we get for feedback from them, and then we will review that feedback and kind of share back out what we heard from the commission at the August 27th meeting. and then prep for, begin to prep for submission, in the fall to the governor.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Big
our calendar.
Big note here, folks. Outside of three working group meetings, I definitely encourage all of us to connect offline. We shouldn't just be tied to the three working group meetings. So if any, after today, if any you have any burning comments, anything you think we should really be thinking about, please email Jeff and Christina, our co-liaisons, CC me to make sure it moves forward. But don't feel like we're tied to just the three working group meetings.
Yeah, I'll preface that, that feedback too is important, which kind of rides into this, this slide. This slide was shown, at the last meeting, from the governance group. So we need to kind of take this and organize ourselves now. And I think, one of the first questions in the survey that, I'm assuming most all of you had received, or completed already, it was the first item in the survey that proposed unified definition, and the feedback around around that. So a plug to fill out that survey if you haven't done it. But again, this slide was shown at the last governance meeting, and their share out, and we need to kind of organize. You can see the student facing elements and the structural elements are some things that we'll continue to kind of think about. And then this one really is, about what Ben had mentioned earlier, recentering kind of ourselves, recentering our vision, in dual enrollment, the COV and the school models, those three areas, early college credits, credential value, and school models, but really kind of honing in on and focusing on, where we want to be. So you can see under the arrow, in each of those boxes, first box, the early college credits, where we want to be. Every student has access to transferable career-aligned, early college credits, that are in some capacity embedded, into pathway programs, statewide. The COVs, where we want to be industry recognized, credentials are embedded in every pathway that are driven, by demand. And then our last, for the models, that kind of theory or idea of regardless of what school model, because we're probably going to see some variation there, regardless of what school model, a career pathway can seamlessly in some capacity be implemented, to expand reach, for all students. So it's basically having, that statewide system, for all students.
Thanks, Jeff.
And then Ben, I'll kind of let you talk about the proof points, from other states.
Yeah, just to get us thinking as we start going into building the recommendations, we shouldn't be in the mindset of our current environment and just looking at what other states are doing. So within our areas, dual enrollment. So in North Carolina, they have a very robust college and career promise program where students basically select if they're going to enter a CTE track or a college transfer pathway. On average, the students who are in that college transfer pathway are earning 12 college credits. So that's on average. So there are obviously students earning a lot more than that. Looking at a place like Idaho, around 60% of their community college enrollment is through high school students taking dual enrollment courses. And in Indiana, which has an Indiana College Credit Core, so they've basically negotiated a 30 credit block. It is gen eds, but that is transferable across all public institutions. 66% of high school students there are earning college credit by the time they're graduating high school. Moving on to credentials of value, a lot of states are moving into tiered incentive payments to districts for students who are earning credentials as they're graduating. I just wanted to highlight in Maryland, their blueprint for Maryland's future. They basically went through the same process that we're doing now. They produced a report in 2022. As part of that, they had a credentials working group, and they really refined the criteria of the credentials that would be offered in high schools. They moved from 650 credentials offered in high school programs to 170. Um, right now, in the credential of value definition, 17 states are using high wage definitions in that. Two are using the MIT Living Wage Calculator. This is something that came up at the last meeting for governance. Um, a few states, Alaska, Ohio, South Dakota, have employers provide the final approval on the industry recognized credentials list that schools can offer. And 23 states, almost half the country, are braiding federal and state dollars to support credential attainment. And just in pathways, I know we've all heard about Delaware. 70% of students there are enrolled in some sort of formal pathway program, and we'll talk a little bit about Delaware and that model. And then in Massachusetts, they also went through a similar process that we're doing now. Theirs is called Reimagining High School. Since that has started, a quarter of their students are enrolled in a formal pathway program, a 17% increase since the plan was released.
Great. So, looking at some of the possible models that we can consider for our commission work. One is a model that's anchored by industry, and Ben just went over a couple of these models, but some folks have this model where it's sort of anchored there. In this context, we can build off of our existing Perkins cluster, so it makes it really easy and simple and clean to scale because those Perkins clusters are already predefined. The dual credits and credentials of value offered in each pathway are automatically aligned to those industries. So this could be one pathway. The downsides to this is that it asks students to commit to an industry early. That might be too early. And it might not cleanly map onto students who are just sort of exploring the liberal arts and maybe don't necessarily have that direction. And there's also potentially places a ceiling on credits and credentials that students can earn because everything's predefined. The second is post-secondary track, and Massachusetts, North Carolina, a couple of others use this model. This allows students to start from their ideal destination rather than a pre-existing, Perkins cluster in contrast. They can build throughout different tracks, and it allows us to more easily prioritize student post-secondary goals. It also creates spaces potentially for expanding PTech and early college high schools, and it just has some more creativity in what is possible with different districts. But in terms of the downsides, it does carry a well-documented tracking, which creates some equity risk. And we don't want to introduce those additional dynamics that we're having to address in the context of this pathways work. So that's a concern. And also less inherent alignment to industry needs and job opportunities because there's a lot more flexibility in developing these pathways. And then the third is looking at some kind of hybrid model, which gives options for the districts to offer very specific career pathway programs. And students can access those pathways at different levels. It recognizes the full range of post-secondary outcomes while guiding students towards sequence courses. It does potentially create widening equity gaps if access to all options aren't available, and that the students can get it in certain districts and not other areas. And then it also could be a much more administrative burden heavy type of implementation for the districts and administrators and counselors and so forth. So this the real important piece around this is thinking about how the model needs to enhance our strengths and not try to force fit into someone else's framework, but utilize other frameworks to sort of see the pros and cons and the evolution of other states' models. Next slide.
Well, I think we could pause here and maybe have some
Okay.
feedback because I think, part of why we had this slide is if we're going to start making recommendations on how to organize dual enrollment and credentials within a pathway system, I think we sort of just talk about what we think that system is going to look like because as a commission, we actually haven't gotten to this point. And in the meeting invite, I sent links to the examples. I'm not sure if people had time to click around on it, but basically, if you do follow the links, they're pretty good in how the states show how their pathway systems are organized. Like Delaware literally has like a healthcare track, marketing track, whatever it is. You click it, you open it up, and it says, which college courses are there. They did a articulation agreement to make sure that the courses offered in the pathway are transferable across all public institutions. Some privates have jumped on as well. And then which credentials are available in that pathway. And really what it does is it creates modules for districts to plug and play who don't know where to start when making a pathway program. So that's anchoring by industry. And Hawaii, Rhode Island, Colorado's are doing the same thing. And then again, like the post-secondary track, I definitely recommend you open up the links to Massachusetts and North Carolina that are in there. But they really start by saying for students, do you want to go really deep on career and technical education and get 900 hours of training experience and graduate high school with some more high-level credentials? Or do you want to get as many college credits as you can, knowing that you want to go to college and that's going to help you? And then there are some tracks in the middle. But I think it's important to talk about this just before we get into what the actual recommendations will be. So I'll stop sharing and just want to hear general feedback from folks. And if people want a minute to click around the links, we could also do that. And Alice, I see you dropped a comment in the chat. Feel free to speak up. But one thing, Alice, that I was thinking about on, the model that's anchored by industry, I feel like if you were to click around the Delaware link or I think there was a Hawaii link, you would look at those modules and say, I'm not all that impressed. Like at CTEX, we're doing we're doing a lot more. So that's kind of where my headspace was.
Yep. Ben, while people are looking at, I could chime in. I mean, I do think, CTEX is a really unique, model in the state, and we can't have, you know, every high school student have this experience. So again, thinking about how to have a continuum and an ecosystem so that everybody is not also reinventing the wheel and pulling on employers. So if you base it on industry, I think we might have to go the hybrid route just because industry's capacity to lead all of this is probably a bit limited. So it's probably going to be some combination of things.
Yeah. Before Charlene, I see your hand. Chris, you put a comment in the chat, and I think, you're really highlighting Connecticut's strengths, and I think where we could be headed. I would love for you to expand on that.
I mean, I'm happy to let the commissioner go ahead of me if sure.
Okay.
Hi, Chris. Actually, I just wanted to share with the slide, and thank you for putting that together and for the additional links. I'd like for committee to spend a little bit of time at some point really exploring the concerns around tracking, because that is a concern. Even in states that, I talk to colleagues, and that is really beginning to rear its head about how kids are tracked. And I think that's something that we need to have a good conversation about, in any system that we want to make sure that we're addressing that issue, that others are engaged in right now and trying to figure out how to address it. So while we're building, we should keep that in mind to see what we need to build to ensure that we don't fall into that same trap for tracking students.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was just going to build off of sort of what Ajit, I think, had pointed out earlier in the meeting. I mean, I think to a certain point, we need to give credit to Connecticut, and there's a lot of states that you mentioned that have programs that still turn to Connecticut to look for best practices and how to do concurrent and dual enrollment. And so I think part of it is identifying what pathways the state wants to put focus on, and then looking at what already exists in our dual credit and concurrent enrollment ecosystem. Where do we have those strengths? To your point, Ben, where are those overlapping classes that either support gen eds or support specific career pathways, and then identify the gaps that we need to sort of build out and expand on. And I think to Jeff's point, every district it's going to look a little bit different. And I think when you talk to superintendents, I'm sure that's what you're hearing, is that some communities want to support specific career pathways. Other communities are looking to expand pathways in certain areas. So kind of to Alice's point, no district can essentially do what the CTEC system does as a standalone district. So really looking at what can they build out within their community, leveraging existing resources, but then also adding into those pieces where the gaps exist.
Thanks, Chris. Ajit, do you want to expand on the comment that you put in?
Sure. I put in because when Chris talked about organizing existing coursework that we already have, and we have, as you've said, and I know it's framed as random acts, but I would posit that not everything is a random act. There are individuals and thoughtful educators behind them. It may not be a sequence the way we want it, but they are planned uh, programs based on students' interest, planned courses based on students' interest. So I shared a document that the SDE released um, about 7 years ago. Actually, Miguel was the commissioner at that point at SDE, and that document went out from him, which actually shows like the different career clusters and the different sequence of courses within each cluster. I think what Chris is raising is mapping the dual credit courses more explicitly. And that work we're updating this document now with the advanced CTE, and we will be actually adding some of those more explicit dual credit courses. We're still not going to say you must do course X and course Y and course Z, as much as these are the kinds of courses that you can take within that particular cluster and pathway. So yeah, I just wanted to just share that document. So yeah, I think the idea of a roadmap, a plan absolutely exists.
Keith?
Thanks, Ben. I want to echo something that Karen Hynek put in the chat as well. I think that, and I mentioned this on a meeting yesterday, Jean and I had with Jen Witness and some others. I think it's important when we talk about pathways to recognize that some pathways do indeed involve higher education and a higher education degree. It's not all requiring a specific IRC for a job right out of high school. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that we have to sort of expand that definition of career pathways to include legitimate pathways at Connecticut employers like Electric Boat, who needs planners, who needs engineers. That would also include a college education as well. So we can't really shut the door. What we try to do very strongly at the Department of Education is maximizing all of the opportunities for all of our students. And, when the commissioner talks about tracking, one thing that I think about is we certainly don't want to start tracking kids to those that are going to get a job right out of high school and those that are going to go on to higher education. We have to be very, very careful about that.
Thanks, Keith. Karen, thank you for dropping that in the chat. I'm interested how you think about the work you're doing with the IRC registry list and just, and I'm sorry, for Karen Amaker, and credentials in general, and how those could be incorporated. Like when these options are given to you, organizing it by industry or organizing it by post-secondary track, just interested, like, what are your reactions from your work? Ways that what you see in the future and how that could be incorporated into either track. Do you lean more towards one way?
I'm sorry, are you speaking to me or Dr.
Yeah,
Hynek?
to
Me.
you.
So I can you start again? I was starting to read
Yeah,
Dr. Hynek's comment in the chat. Sorry.
sorry. So with the work you're doing with the IRC registry list, and just seeing the potential models of ways that other states are organizing this, do you lean a specific way, especially if we want to start saying that, every career pathway where it's applicable is going to include some sort of credential of value? Because the second option of sort of organizing it by post-secondary track, if you have an option where students are just going to go and get as many college credits as possible, that might not include a credential. If we're organizing it by industry track, I think most of them would. But I'm just interested on your reactions to that.
Sure. Well, first, let me preface this by saying that I was the founding principal of PTEC, so I understand what that means when we're talking about early college high schools and Connecticut having that as one of its flagship high schools. That said, I think someone else talked about the hybrid model. I think it might have been Alice. And so I think that then into the commissioner's point, as well as Chief Norton's point, we have to make sure that we are serving every student. So I think leaning in one direction or another could be more like polar opposites. And so we have to think about this on the continuum of what does the student want and need to be successful and to have a life that includes a family wage. So I think it's a little bit of both. It has to include IRCs that are non-degreed, which is what the agency is working on now, our non-degreed IRC registry, as well as because when we think about certain examples, barbering, while it may not be a credential of value, it could lead to opportunities for entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship. And so we need to tap into those entrepreneurial spirits of students and making sure everyone has an opportunity. So there definitely is a place for the credential of value, but there could also be the argument that credentials in and of themselves are stackable. And so while you're starting with something that is foundational, it could move up the ranks to becoming a credential of value. So, and again, I think Keith echoed this. I want to echo what Keith said about not all of our students are going directly into the workforce. So we have to be wide in our approach, broad in our approach to making sure that we meet students where they are. And again, not necessarily narrowing the pool of options for students.
Thank you. Jen, I see a hand.
I just wanted to echo what Chris Todd is putting in the chat around sort of just taking a couple of creating a couple of dual credit pathways that are like aligned with industry and just putting those out there for institutions and districts to adopt. I mean, I think the problem with Connecticut, my sense is a little bit that we are a little bit behind in both of these worlds. So we're kind of combining everything and it's too much. When we talk about IRCs, that's important, but we also haven't even done some of the career pathways work that keeps being highlighted at the commission meeting. And I don't think we should, they don't all have to coalesce. I think we really need to be focused on some of the low-hanging fruit that we need to do, sort of that three bucket model, Ben, that you mentioned, that slide of sort of the three outcomes. And I just want to echo, like I said, what Chris said around like, can we just pick a couple of career pathways in those and some key areas and work together with SDE to sort of outline what those curriculum look like, and then let the IHEs replicate that. I mean, so like do the off the shelf health science, health career pathways that everyone agrees on, and then let the districts and the higher ed sort of work to implement as needed. But I think a little bit more direction and a little bit of prioritizing what are some of the key pathways we want to prioritize with dual credit, working off of what everyone else is doing well, I think could go a long way. Because I know Chris, for example, is working with Goodwin, sort of combining coursework to create a career pathway, and we could do that in other places as well.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in that, to echo what's being said. I think that we've been trying to do something similar that Chris just showed as well. And I know he's been working with Paula, who's helping, Paula Tulsey, who's helping lead that for Central as well. And, I think sometimes when we look at like, is it clusters? Is it a pathway? Is it called this? Is it called that? Is this something, to your point, Jen, like where do we start that we can start building a foundation, and can we at least agree on maybe some common language regarding, is it a pathway, cluster, is some of that defined the same, and then institutions can put different courses that fit into those clusters, pathways, and then it can, be focused on what's being offered at the institution. I feel like that also goes back to one of the points that if we have something that's more agreed upon collectively as a state, then we try to move away from it being only sustainable based on an individual, that you have something that is more sustainable over time, that you're focusing on the courses within those areas.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. Keith, and then I think we'll move on to the next slide because we're sort of headed that way anyway.
And the only thing I would want to add is we have priority areas that have been set forth by the governor. So it would really be, I believe it would be easy to really implement what Chris and Jen are suggesting while also meeting the goals of the administration.
Yeah. I think it's also going to be part of the commission's plan on how specific pathways are chosen. I think it's also, I think someone in the comments had something about AI. I mean, there are emerging technologies that right now there might not be a ton of jobs, but now is a good time to start planning for them. But so we're all kind of getting into the recommendations. And so I'm going to quickly share the slides again. And what we did is we just want to put something on paper for folks to react to. And this is before we started having this conversation. At the next meeting, what I would love to do is we're going to take this conversation that we had and really start putting on paper where we think these recommendations are headed, and then at the next meeting go deep on them. But Christina, do you want to take this slide, recognizing that this is before this conversation,
Yeah.
and would just love to hear everyone's reactions because I think we're kind of organically getting here.
Yeah, definitely. So when we look at this slide, this sort of anchors us in the guiding principles that our commission has been, and our committee specifically has been working on. So for dual enrollment, that we want these offerings in career pathways that will map to defined credentials, associates, bachelor's degrees, and articulate across higher education. And so the recommended action for that is really focusing on sequencing and articulation. So basically packaging pathways and it's an organization of courses so that there is some definition to what a pathways look like, that we use articulation agreements statewide to be able to facilitate getting the transferability and acceptance of credits where needed. And then, of course, a very strong, robust teacher certification program. When we're looking at credentials of value as a guiding principles, that these credentials of values will be built into the pathway sequence of study, then we're looking about narrowing the scope of credentials offered. So we're looking at using CSDE's IRC registry as a starting point to understand what is currently offered, then leveraging OWS's Credentials of Value initiative to narrow the scope and start to align the pathways. And then the third guiding principle is really looking at alignment to the pathways. And so when we're putting this all together, that this is going to be aligned to a career pathway that the students get to choose. And all of their offerings, would be inclusive of that. And then the recommended actions for this is really creating that culture of combining college credits and credentials. So, we were talking a little bit about this in the hybrid possibility, but integrating dual credits and credentials of values into the curriculum, to look at credentials to credit course walk to identify what credentials would count towards post-secondary credit. So again, needing really good alignment in here and having some prescription, but also having some flexibilities on a district level vis-a-vis our articulation agreements. So I know we have discussed some of this already, but when you look at these draft recommendations at a high level, what are you seeing that could work or not work, and why? And look in the chat. So Chris is talking about there's also coursework that has multifaceted outcomes. For instance, solid work courses, students can earn college credit post-secondary in addition to IRCs for immediate job placement. Okay, that's a good example. Karen Hynek, dual credit offerings and career pathways will map to a defined credential, certificate, associate, bachelor's, and articulate across major higher ed. Certificates will also play an important role in the workforce and educational ecosystems. And Chris says the statewide articulation should be a goal, but ultimately goes beyond our scope at each institution, determines what they accept for transfer credits. So Chris, you've got your hand up.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things too that the commission should clarify is what they mean by teacher certification, because I think transfer credit and teacher certification kind of go hand in hand, especially as the state now is going to require programs to be NACEP accredited. NACEP requires teacher credentialing to align with adjunct hiring standards at the institution. And that's partly why the credits have such high national transferability rates. So I think when we talk about teacher credentialing, like we have to have honest conversations around, are we talking about it from the district's perspective? Are we talking about it from in alignment with hiring standards with IHEs? And what's the ultimate goal? If the ultimate goal is to have students get credits that are transferable and portable, then I think we have to prioritize sort of what is the hiring standards for each institution that offers that credit. So again, I think it's just a bigger conversation than just saying teacher certification.
Great point. Karen Amaker?
Just looking at the guiding principle number 3 and the recommended action, it just brings up for me at what point does the student earn the credential of value? And in some cases, based on the work that we've done at the agency, students cannot earn a credential until they meet a certain age requirement or eligibility requirements for sitting for an assessment for that credential. So we want to ensure that there aren't necessarily built-in roadblocks. So that's just a consideration that I'd like folks to think about as we move forward with this.
Great, thank you. I also see Karen Hynek put the most difficult part of this is going to be institutions of higher ed accepting these as transfer credits for their pathways and programs of study.
I think we should talk about the one Karen put in because I do agree this is an area where I really don't know all that much about, and that's why we invited everyone who does know a lot about it. So maybe if we could, Karen, if you could just talk about the difficulties there and potential ways we could overcome that, because really what we've seen in other states is that statewide articulation agreement. I think Chris brought up a good point as to why that may not work, but would love to just for you to expand on that.
I think it just depends on the actual program that a student's going into. So we can have things that are generic going into health science and the healthcare fields, but each of the individual fields have their own required courses, many of which are externally accredited. So, for instance, the math you need for radiologic technology may be different than the math that you need for nursing. And the science you need for those two courses or programs of study are different. So I think that's what's hard. And I'm sure even at the 4-year level, there are those concrete differences. And just making sure that credit counts across because transfer, although I think the state has done a lot of work in transfer and we're doing better, it's always the devil's in the detail.
Is there a way that you think would simplify it?
I don't know that there's a way in which it would be simplified other than by going to each of the actual programs and having conversations about it. Because I do think there is a difference dependent upon the job that someone is looking to do. And that's why the maths may be different. That's why the sciences may be different. And it is a significant difference. So someone may take a course in their pathway in ECE or in concurrent enrollment that may not count. It may count as transfer credit, but it may not actually count in their program of study. And that's something that nationally we have seen with dual and concurrent enrollment. There's a lot of credit, and it's great. Students are learning, but at the same point in time, when we talk about trying to save time and money and be very prescriptive, that's sometimes what the difficult aspect is. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I think at the next meeting, we should go deeper on that one.
We might then want to just do an IHE meeting on this a little bit too, because I think getting everyone in a room is a great idea. And there's, to Karen's point, like Christina's team and Karen's team at CT State are doing really great work on this, but there's some majors where you just cannot guarantee credit because they're going to have to assess it based on their accreditation of that program. So you don't, so I think the way to start is like, let's look at which pathways we were talking about here. Someone mentioned we already have a priority list, and then we could worry about the transfer more specifically, Ben. And maybe a broader question is like, how is Connecticut going to address this issue? Are we going to give CT State some staff to manage transfer and articulation statewide, or so, like who's going to manage it? Then is the question. So I don't think it's SCE necessarily on this transfer of credit because we need a more robust system of transfer of credit within IHEs, right? And so I think getting a sense of the pathways we're talking about, then we can worry a little bit more around transfer and guaranteeing transfer for those pathways because it's really just going to depend on the major and the different degree programs and the institutions.
And Ben, I mean, just to add to Jen's point and Karen's point, I mean, I'm relatively new to IHE, but I know like transfer credit between institutions in Connecticut has been a long-standing issue where certain programs at certain institutions don't accept the credit coming in to count towards that major or count towards that particular program of study. And I mean, that's something that the Board of Trustees between institutions have been trying to articulate for a long time. So again, I think that that becomes part of the challenge too, is just navigating sort of the existing roadblocks that have been in place for some time.
Yeah, I think based on this, and I mean, please folks jump in, but I feel like there are two options, and one is like try to fix that, which is hard, or the other is look at the courses that could be offered in different pathways and just avoid those ones that we know won't articulate. And I think that is work. I don't think the recommendation has to say exactly which courses it would be, but the recommendation would be major institutions are going to look over curriculums and select courses that we know will articulate across institutions. Would something like that make sense?
There's a when I've worked in a community college system in Florida, one of the things we would have is we would have all of the state university system and say, if you're taking this class, it will apply to these institutions. You take this one, it'll apply to some. So there could be a nuance of if you're taking this math here, these are the only institutions in Connecticut that would actually they would transfer to. So students would be able to understand that information up front as they choose that pathway. It could be one of those options there. I will say, the question about are there other states that have done it? Some states have by law mandated common course numbering and transferability of courses, but it's a long process because you have to get everybody to say these classes are at the same rigor and standard across their entire system. So it's very long and cumbersome process to do that.
Yeah.
And it's also by major. So it really is a major issue as much as it's a transfer issue. So there is certain levels based on the job that someone is going to be doing or the career pathway they're going into that has to be aligned to the curriculum, and it is nuanced. So I agree there could be some type of crosswalk disclaimer where people can know, I'm making it up. You're taking an anatomy and physiology one, that by and large, this is the course that you need in order to go into nursing, and it will be accepted across the publics and hopefully the privates as well. But also understand if you're not going into a pathway in nursing, but you're going into a different type of healthcare, you might need a different type of science, depending upon the field you're going into.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. So here's what we're going to do. So we're at time. What we'll do is we're going to recap this conversation. Might be a couple slides, might be a Word document, but the next meeting, I think we need to go deeper and come out of that with recommendations that we're comfortable with. Again, what we showed up on a slide was just to get this conversation going, which I think we accomplished. Um, yeah, so we will take what we heard, refine it, and then next week, I think really get into the nitty-gritty. And then on the 11th, it's really just presenting back to you, making sure everyone is comfortable with it. Feel free to reach out offline. I know there was a lot going on in the chat. I'm gonna try and capture everything. Um, but please, thank you everyone so much for your participation, and thank you. So we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned at 3:01 p.m.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.